Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to be looking at some more 5-star predictions. When I originally created my first 5-star prediction video this year, I didn't realize this was going to become a series, but I keep reading the 5-star predictions I put on my TBR, and so I feel like I need to update you guys, and then there are always books that are coming up or that are on my TBR that I also think are going to be 5 stars, so I don't know. I guess this has become a series on my channel. I think it's been fun so far, so I wanted to make another video updating you guys on my last 5-star predictions, how I did on those, and then I have some more books on my TBR that I think are going to be great. So let's get started. I will start with the books on my 5-star prediction list from last video that didn't turn out so well, and then we will get into the ones that were actually a success. So the first book I rated 3 stars was Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea. This was one of 2 pirate books on my 5-star predictions list, and this was unfortunately the one that did not work for me. It's 3 stars, so it's not like I hated this book by any means. I just thought it was okay. I do think that part of the reason I really didn't enjoy this book was because of the fact that I went into it with wrong expectations. This book is marketed as fantasy historical fiction, or historical fantasy, I guess, and I definitely think it's more historical fiction. There are very slight representations of fantastical elements, but I really think it's more based in some mythology and some belief systems than it is in fantasy and like things like that. So that is something, if you are into historical fiction, this might be something you would consider. I do think there was a lot of research that went into this book. If you've never heard of this book, you follow I can't remember her name, but she is a Chinese pirate queen, and she becomes the captain of a fleet of pirate ships after her husband dies. And her husband dies at the very, very beginning of the book. And this book is dual timeline. You get her past, how she became a pirate queen, and then you get her future after her husband passes. The event of her husband dying puts things kind of in dire straits for her, because she has to figure out how to keep herself safe and then how to remain in power if that's what she wishes to do as a woman in charge of a whole bunch of pirates who are used to being ran by a man. So I think that this book just didn't give me what I wanted. It does have a ton of historically, what I presume to be historically accurate things. I don't study historical events, so maybe there are some things that are not true, but it seemed very historically accurate for the time. And it focused on the political events, and instead of when I pick up a pirate story, what I want is I want to see an adventure. I don't want to see an entire lifetime. I want to kind of really focus in on an important event or trip that they've taken, an adventure that they took, or I want to focus on maybe a few, but this focuses on a lot of culminating events that happen in this woman's life, both past and present, that led her to where she is now and the decisions that she's making. And like I said, it is very political. You get to see the inner workings of a pirate society and the clash between pirates and an empire. And so that was interesting. It just wasn't what I wanted. I do think that this book, because of the focus on historical accuracy, is a little dry. And I can't say that I loved any of the characters or that I felt close to any of the characters. I do feel for the main character and some of the things that she has to go through being a woman in the time period that this book is set in, which I believe, if I'm correct, I think it was the 1500s, if I remember correctly, but don't take my word for that. But yeah, this just wasn't for me. I absolutely think that it was well written, and I would encourage people who like historical fiction to pick this up. The next book was also a 3-star read, and that was The City of Nightmares. I have talked about this in a previous video, but it's been a few minutes, so I'll just give a brief explanation. This is a fantasy horror book. It is YA, and you follow a girl who has lost her family and lives in a city of turmoil. The city itself is afflicted by something that turns people into their nightmares. So people are taking drugs and supplements to prevent themselves from either sleeping or prevent themselves from dreaming, because if you dream and you have a nightmare, you can turn into your nightmare. And so I really enjoyed that concept, but it wasn't explored as much as I wanted it to be. We follow this girl, once again, I don't remember her name. She ends up joining a cult, or a non-cult is what she calls it, after her family passes for safety and security, and she is a bit of a coward, and she doesn't let that deter her from telling you her feelings about being terrified of living in this city. And she gets sent on a mission for this organization and is put in some circumstances that she's not super happy about, and she has to figure out how to deal. One of the things that, like I mentioned, I really wanted to focus on the environment and the world. They talk about the fact that there is a pterodactyl in the city that is a nightmare. It is a person who has turned into a nightmare, who has been tamed and is now somebody's pet. You have this giant spider that eats people that comes into play in the story. And there are all of these different possible, anything is possible, because nightmares are all individualized. And one of the things I was disappointed by was one of the main characters. Before I say that, I guess I should say, within this world, so you have nightmares that are people who have become the nightmares. And sometimes the people who become the nightmares come back to their mental faculties and remain in their nightmare state. So they look like a nightmare, but they're actually just a normal person. And then you have other people who become nightmares who never come back into their mental state, like a safe mental state, and so they become dangerous to society. So one of the characters that we end up dealing with, and this girl ends up dealing with, is a nightmare, but is a nightmare, like the most basic nightmare, if I can say that. And I was just a little disappointed that that was the path that we went down when we had all of these other avenues that we could focus on. That's the nightmare that we chose to have as the side character. It was a little disappointing. Their relationship was fine. He was fine as a character. I just wish that we would have focused on some of the more original content that could have happened. This is a series. I haven't decided if I'm going to continue yet. It was a really quick read. So if it sounds interesting to you, I wouldn't discourage people from picking it up. I just wish they would have focused on some of the cooler aspects of the world. And part of that, I do think, is the YA component, and the fact that they didn't go really deep into some of the horror elements of this book is because of that. But yeah, the next 5-star prediction for me was Fourth Wing. And this ended up being a 4-star read for me. So I did enjoy it. It was not the best book I've ever read, which I know it's getting a ton of hype. So yeah. I recently talked about this in my chunky TBR or chunky check-in video, so I will link that for you guys if you would like more information about my thoughts on Fourth Wing. But if you haven't heard of Fourth Wing, we are talking about dragon riders, a girl who has a chronic illness and is forced to be a dragon rider and become a dragon rider, and we follow her journey through that experience. It has romance in it. It has war, some political elements. What I didn't enjoy about this book, the reason that it was not a 5-star, I think that the world building in this book was a little lacking. And I think that because of that, some of the culminating events in the book were hinted at throughout the book, but I don't think that there was enough build up to make those events real and really impactful. So that's why I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think the characters were enjoyable. The romance was fun. The dragons and the information that we get about the dragons, I think, is really entertaining and fascinating. And I am planning on continuing this into the second book. So hopefully the world building becomes a little bit more of the story in the second book. The first success from the last list of 5-star predictions was the 5th season. I buddy read this with Leandra over at Leandra the TBR Zero and absolutely loved this book. So if you've never heard of 5th season, you follow 3 main perspectives, or 3 perspectives, each different generation. So you have a young girl, you have like a young adult, and a middle-aged woman that you're following. And all of them live in this world that is having apocalyptic events happen. And these apocalyptic events happen pretty far apart as far as time frame goes. And so you might have an event that happens and then maybe hundreds of years pass before something else happens. And these events render the world very harsh, not unlivable, but definitely the people in the world have created ways to adapt and stockpile things to prepare for these events to happen. And so we follow these 3 women. They are not together, they are separate storylines. All 3 of them are what we call origins, which are human beings that have the ability to feel and interact with the Earth's surface. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Because of their powers, they are ostracized in society, and so origins are feared. And so the 3 women that we follow, you get to see their perspective of the world and how they are treated based on what they are. And so the little girl you're following her, figuring out that she's an origin first off, and then what happens whenever you figure out you're an origin, what path you have to follow, or what path the people around you make you follow since you are so young. The middle, like the young adult perspective, you follow a girl who is in the Fulcrum, which is a school for origins. They teach them how to control their powers. So you follow that perspective. And then the third perspective is a middle-aged woman who has 2 children, who lives in a city that is very close to some destruction that happens at the beginning of the book. And one of her children goes missing, and you follow her trying to figure out where her child has gone. One of the things I was just astounded by at this book is N.K. Jemisen's plotting. The pieces that fit together and the pacing of how we're given information was just incredible. I don't think I've ever read a book that is as well plotted as this book. Leandra and I would voice message each other on Instagram back and forth, and we would ask questions each chapter. We read 3 chapters a day, and we would ask questions, and almost always within a day, our questions would be answered, or we would have a little bit more information. I just really enjoyed this world. I am so excited to continue the series. Leandra and I are going to be buddy reading the entire series, so we're going to start book 2 next month. The next prediction that was also a success, which you can probably tell because it's missing from my bookshelf, was The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi, or Sirafi. I always mispronounce her last name. I'm pretty sure it's Amina Al-Sirafi. I absolutely love this book. I actually just purchased this today. I went out to Barnes & Noble. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. I don't really know how it's any different, but I love this cover. It's amazing. Anyway, this book was fantastic. This is also a pirate story, and it is the pirate story that I wanted. So if you haven't heard of this book, you follow Amina Al-Sirafi, and she is a bit of a legend. She is known for her pirating crew and her ship, and she has retired. She has a young daughter who I believe is 8 years old, and her elderly mother she's taken care of, and they kind of live in isolation, just away from society, not like only by themselves, and someone approaches Amina and asks her to go on one last trip to retrieve a daughter who has been kidnapped of someone she knows. And so she gets her crew back together, and they go on an adventure. And I really loved this story. There are so many details in this book that I was impressed by. This is historical fantasy, and with emphasis on the fantasy as opposed to with emphasis on the historical piece. There are definitely historical components to it, but I definitely think the emphasis is more on the fantasy elements, which I enjoy. So there are so many interesting characters that you meet along the way. Her crew is fantastic, each with their own personality and backstory that you learn about, and how they kind of come together as their own little found family. It was a really cute backstory, as well as Amina's personality and the fact that she kind of takes these really crazy events that are happening she takes it all in stride. She makes light of it. So when really awful things are happening, I'll give you an example, and I won't tell you what specific event, but there's an event that happens in the book that she is not super happy with, and something is trying to happen, and she's like, oh, hell no, like, this isn't how it's gonna go. And I just really enjoyed the fact that she could make jokes, still be sincere in what she believes should happen and what shouldn't happen. But yeah, just I really enjoyed her character and all of the characters around her. She has within her crew a poisoner, a person who took over her as a pirate captain when she retired, and then a map, like a navigator. Those are like the three main characters that you have on the ship, and then you have some other people as well that you learn about. And then the islands that you travel to, some of the cities that you go to, the different politics that are involved in the kind of craftiness that they have to get away with certain things was just really fun. I had a really good time with this. I also was happy to see within this time frame, like the historical piece of it, there are different, within this book, there's a diversity of religions happening, and even within her own crew, the people in her own crew have learned how to respect one another's beliefs and live in peace with each other. And I just think that that's a really cool aspect to have in a historical fiction book or historical fantasy book, mainly because I don't think I've ever read anything that I've read things that deal with religious beliefs clashing, but I don't know that I've ever read where I don't want to say the focus, because the religion was definitely not the focus of this book, but when it was brought up within the crew members, you have this mutual respect between them that I just thought was really cool to see. So if you are interested in a pirate adventure story, truly give this a try, because I did think it was fantastic. I will say that it was a little slow at the beginning. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, I read this on audio because I didn't have the physical copy at the time, and something I thought was really cool about it was the entire story is told as if Amina is giving her first person experience of this adventure that they've gone on, but then there are bits and pieces where it will break, what is that called, the fourth wall, and you will be able to tell that she's speaking into almost a microphone or a recording device, and she's talking to the person that is recording her story, and he will kind of break in with some things every once in a while as well. So I thought that was just a really fun aspect of the audio. I'm not sure how they did that within the physical book. I will reread this at some point in time, and this is also a series that I will be continuing with. So I'm really happy to have found this book. I really enjoyed it. On to my new TBR for my 5-star predictions. So I have 5 new books that I am considering as 5-star predictions. I definitely am not as confident about this list as I have been about the ones in the past, so I don't think that I'm gonna meet my goal. So within the last video, I said I wanted to beat my goal of getting 1 of my predictions correct, and I guess that was the first video, and the last video, or from the last video's predictions, I've now gotten 2 of my predictions correct. I just don't think that I'm gonna get 3. I think I would have to be really lucky, but I really do think that these 5 books have a chance, and I'm really excited to read all of them. So let's talk about my TBR. The first book is Fireborn. This is highly recommended by Elliot Brooks, and I typically have similar tastes. This is also, I've been told by multiple people that this is Fourth Wing, but better. And I gave Fourth Wing 4 stars, so if it's better, I think this is a pretty good 5-star prediction. I really do enjoy the Dragon Rider aspect. I know that story has been told a million times, but I'm a sucker for it. So I know that this is, I think, YA, whereas Fourth Wing is new adult, so I hope that doesn't get in the way. But if they do like the world building a little bit better, I think that I could really enjoy this. So I'm excited to get to this one. The next book on my 5-star predictions is The Book That Wouldn't Burn. This is a book about books, which I love. I'm a sucker for a book within a book. I think that the synopsis, just the first 2 pieces of the synopsis, I think the 2 main characters that we end up following, I think are going to be fascinating. So I'm just going to read you 2 sentences from the synopsis. So it says, a boy has lived his whole life trapped within a vast library, older than empires and larger than cities. Which, sign me up already. And then the second sentence says, a girl has spent hers in a tiny settlement out on the dust where nightmares stalk and no one goes. Just those 2 lines alone. Also, the author, Mark Lawrence, is one that I don't think I've read anything by him. And if I have, it's been quite a while, but I do want to give him a try because I know that he's beloved. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this one as well. The next book is Sons of Darkness. So this book I've actually had on my TBR for quite a while, but I've had such a hard time finding it. I believe, I don't know the whole story, but there were issues with publishing at some point in time, and because this book was published either in 2021 or 2022, but it essentially went off the market and you couldn't get it in certain areas. And so it just came in. I pre-ordered it, even though I don't know, the pre-order situation was weird, but it just arrived on my Kindle, and so I do have access to it now. This is a grimdark fantasy that is Indian inspired, which I'm already intrigued. Grimdark has been something I've been exploring this year with the First Law trilogy, and so I'm excited to kind of dig into that. This also, I believe, has some Indian mythology that Kai had in it, and it's mixed with the Game of Thrones. That was kind of like the tagline that was on Goodreads, which I find to be a really interesting concept. So yeah, I don't know. I've read the synopsis before, but it's been a minute. But every time I see this book, my heart just calls out to it. And so yeah, this is also a debut novel. So I'm really excited. I really enjoyed Kai and the history and culture in that book, and so I'm hoping that mixed with grimdark fantasy is just going to be a win for me. The next book on this TBR is the Rabbitback Literature Society. This is another book I haven't heard anybody talk about. I actually got this recommendation from Kirsten over at Reading Nymph, and she described this as weird, which I'm like, okay, sign me up. I loved Catherine House, and I was intrigued by Bunny. Bunny wasn't my absolute favorite. I ended up rating it a 3, but I really liked the weirdness of it, and so I'm looking for more books like that. So that's one of the reasons that this was on my radar. But then when you read the synopsis of this book, it talks about how this is a literature society, and there's 10 members, I believe, and you're following the 10th member that has just joined. And the synopsis says she didn't realize the society, like she thought the society was something different. And I believe the person that she replaced has gone missing and they don't know what's happened to her. And I'm intrigued. So I think this sounds amazing. Once again, a book that revolves around books. I'm going to be a happy camper. And the fact that it's weird, yeah, sign me up. And the last book on this TBR is The Remarkable Retirement of Edna Fisher. This is another one that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and I just think it sounds fantastic. It definitely sounds goofy, and so goofy can go, it's a little hit or miss for me, so we'll see if I actually enjoy it. But if you haven't heard about this, it kind of takes the chosen one trope and turns it on its head. Instead of having, and it says this in the synopsis, it kind of pokes fun at the fact that the chosen one trope a lot of times focuses on the younger generations. And now we're going to take an 83-year-old woman and she's going to be the chosen one. And she's going to defeat a sorcerer from doing something bad. I think it was a dragon riding sorcerer, if I remember correctly. Even though she's never dealt with magic one day in her life, she's going to have to do it. She's going to have to figure it out. And I'm here for it. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. It sounds really fun and cheesy, and yeah, so I'm hoping that it's the right type of goofy for me. So those are my new 5-star predictions. We'll see if they turn out. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to tie my last video and get 2 predictions correct. If you guys have a 5-star prediction, or if you've recently read a 5-star book, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know what you're currently reading, what you're anticipating reading, and what you're loving. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.